I'm over $750 million in debt, and I'm going to break down in this video how the wealthy use debt as a tool to become extremely rich, and how you can start to do the exact same thing. The wealth strategy of The Secret is buy, borrow, die. Now, a strategy is literally just a blueprint of good decision making. So this is not rocket science, but I assure you, you can do this. All people need income. The question is, if you're poor and middle class, that's earned income or money from transactions that you're doing. The rich and the very wealthy use borrowed cash. So rule number one is buy. So what you want to do is you want to buy assets like real estate or businesses. You can even start a business or a life insurance policy with a cash value. But what you're doing is you're buying assets that are appreciating, because guess why? You don't pay tax on appreciated assets. That's rule number one. You buy. And if you don't have the money to buy, then you need to watch some of my other videos, because you do not need money to buy cash flowing assets. It might surprise you that most wealthy people don't take any money out of their companies because, of course, they get taxed on it. In fact, there's 8.5 trillion with a T of untaxed income that's not tapped for people that they call the $1 salary club. So just Google this and you'll see who's on that list. People that you know, like Elon Musk, they're in the $1 salary club because they take all of their money from borrowed cash. Rule number two is you borrow against your holdings. So you're borrowing against a business or real estate or even a life insurance policy with cash value. So you buy first, then you borrow the money out of that. And the cool part about this is that the money you borrow is tax-free because it's debt. It's not actually a sale. When you sell, you owe tax. When you do not sell, you do not owe tax. It's that simple. So what you do is you buy and then you borrow against the appreciating asset that you've already bought. If you take $1 million salary out of a business, you're going to pay somewhere in the mid 30% in tax. If you borrow that $1 million out of that same business, you're going to pay zero. The reason is because it's not a sale and it's not earned income. You actually don't get taxed on debt because you owe it back. So with rule number one, when you buy something, you need to make sure that people will lend against it. Like real estate, some kind of collateral. You want to make sure that somebody will lend against it and you can draw some cash out of that asset. As long as you do not sell, there will be no tax. So the wealthy use loans or borrowed cash to pay for their lifestyles. And they take very little income out of the business in the form of earned income because that's taxed. I'm doing a free Q&A real estate predictions webinar at noon on New Year's Eve, Mountain Standard Time. That's noon, New Year's Eve, Mountain Standard Time. If you're interested, just go to investwithmc.com/Ken 2025. That's investwithmc.com/Ken 2025. Step three, we all die. Unfortunately, it is a fact of life. So how do you transfer all of those things onto your heirs tax-free? There are three ways. The first way is what we call a step up in basis. So when I pass away, let's say my house is worth $1 million and it appreciated to $2 million, it would pass to my heirs, let's say my two kids, for $2 million, and they would not owe tax. That's called a step up in basis. What that means is that $1 million that I got through appreciation transfers to them tax-free. They literally owe zero on my home. If they sell it on day one and they get $2 million, they owe zero tax. If they keep it for 10 more years and it goes to $3 million, then of course they owe tax on the $1 million gain from $2 million to $3 million. But that's how a step up in basis works. So you can transfer your assets to heirs through what's called a step up in basis. The second one, of course, is a 1031 exchange. And I talk a lot about this in my real estate videos. We're doing 5 of those right now, actually, where you can buy, borrow, and then sell, but then you defer capital gains into another deal, and it just keeps kicking the can down the road. And then, of course, I can transfer those into a trust, which I've already done. And there's lots of different kinds of trusts. There's revocable trusts and irrevocable trusts. And I'm not going to get into all the nuances of what they are. But I can assure you, if you transfer your assets into a trust, then the appreciation grows tax-free inside of that trust as well for your heirs. So again, when you die, those assets have already appreciated inside of those trusts, and those heirs, of course, don't have the tax. It's important to understand that you can do this with real estate. You can do this with stocks. You can do this with businesses. You can do this with any kind of assets, and I would definitely make sure that you engage a CPA to make sure this is set up correctly. So most people pay more tax as they accumulate more wealth over the period of time. The smart ones, or the wealthy ones, pay less tax over time because they use these tax strategies that are perfectly legal. As their wealth skyrockets, they actually pay less tax. So a lot of you might be in the exact same circumstance that I was when I started this, which was I had a W-2 income and I hardly had any savings. What I focused on is I found cash flowing assets for rich people that appreciated over time that people would lend against. And once I found that and solved that problem for other people, specifically rich people, then I had plenty of money to invest in deals, even though I didn't have any. And then eventually I didn't need them anymore because I had my own income. So that's how you start. You start with finding that cash flowing deal that appreciates over time that people can lend against. It doesn't necessarily matter what that appreciating asset is, as long as it grows over time and you can borrow against it. So let me tell you how my company works, MC Company. So we have about $750 million in debt. But what a lot of people don't think about is how much equity we have. Now, we can't get to the equity, of course, until we borrow out of that, which we do from time to time when rates are in a good spot. But in the meantime, I have 10,000 tenants paying off that debt. That's a really important thing. So not only do I have debt, but I have covered debt. In other words, like a credit card would be me. That would be my paycheck paying back a credit card. In this particular case, it's borrowed against a property where a lot of people live and they pay every single month rent. And then I take that rent and pay down the mortgage. So that's how that works. So I'm hedging inflation through fixed rate debt, and I have cash flow. And when rates are in a good spot, then I can go harvest more money and borrow more cash to be able to use for however I want. I can go buy more real estate. I can go buy a house. I can do whatever I want, but it's tax-free because I'm harvesting the cash out of an asset that I already have. So I'll tell you a story about my own family. So my mom fell, unfortunately, during the pandemic, and all the kids were freaking out, of course. And she broke her hip, and she needed 24/7 care. So we had to put her into some kind of care that could watch her for 24 hours a day. In the meantime, her house was vacant, and the family got together and they said, we should sell her house to pay for the care. Very common scenario. My mom bought the house for 10 grand years ago, and it's worth somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. If we would have sold it that time, because she's still alive, we would have had to pay tax on, let's say, a $700,000 to $800,000 gain. That would have been a sizable tax check. Let's say a couple $100,000 at least. That would have netted us a lot less. And of course, we would have used that to take care of her care. The better idea is to wait. And sorry, Mom, but the reality is she's going to pass away at some point, just like I am. And at that point, we'll get a step up in basis. And now if the home is, let's say, worth $800,000, it transfers to the heirs or the kids for exactly that amount. If we sell it right then there's zero tax. So even though she bought it for 10 grand, and when she passes, let's say it's 800, then that actually transfers to the heirs for zero tax if we sold it in year one right away. So that's how step up in basis works. If you sell something, you owe tax. If you don't owe tax. And in this particular case, we're just using the tax law to our advantage to save over $200,000. So what we decided to do was we put a tenant in there that actually ended up paying for my mom's monthly, and that covered her completely. She was happy. My mom didn't have to sell the house. The tenant is paying for her monthly expenses, and if she wants to, she can move back into the house at some other time. So that was a win. Instead of trying to sell the house to pay for her care, we were able to put a tenant in there maintain that cash flow, and not have over a $200,000 taxable event on her house. So that's how the wealthy use the tax loss to their advantage. Because in a lot of scenarios, people would sell that house at that point because they want the money, and they pay a huge tax bill as a result. If you want an in-depth understanding of multifamily investing in just 40 minutes, this next video is for you. My partner and I, Ross, just walked through one of our properties where we share actual tips and strategies that you can use yourself with how we buy and invest in real estate.